All right, let's dive right into this explainer and demystify the actual rulebook governing some of the most impactful upcoming votes in the U.S. House of Representatives. We're looking at a document known simply as H-Res blank. It's a House Rules Committee resolution, and honestly, it offers a fascinating look into how power is truly exercised in Congress. So, we're starting with a question that affects pretty much everyone. Are you completely tired of changing your clocks twice a year? Well, believe it or not, the fate of your literal alarm clock is tied up in the exact same legislative document as billions of dollars in foreign aid. Sounds totally wild, right? But hey, that's just the reality of congressional packaging for you. The document we're looking at actually kicks off with this highly anticipated bill, H.R. 139, the Sunshine Protection Act of 2025. This is the legislation aiming to make daylight saving time permanent. And it's an issue so universally felt that even international news outlets, like Pakistan Today, are out there actively tracking exactly how the U.S. House handles this exact bill. Here's our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to cover setting the House rules, the Sunshine Protection Act, national security appropriations, proposed foreign funding cuts, and finally, veterans and purchase privacy. All right, part one, setting the House rules, the legislative gatekeeper. To really understand what Congress is doing here, you have to understand the rules of the game they're playing. And there's this stark contrast between the two main ways bills get handled. Basically, the Rules Committee decides if a bill gets a closed rule, meaning it is strictly locked down, 0 amendments allowed on the floor, or a structured rule. Now, structured rule is still highly controlled, but it opens the door, just a crack, to a very specific pre-approved list of debates. This procedural menu is absolutely wild. 4 massive, completely different pieces of legislation are just grouped together under this one single set of rules. I mean, you've got daylight saving time sitting right next to the 2027 National Security and State Department appropriations, right alongside a Veterans Act and a bill on purchase privacy. It's the whole shebang in one document. Moving on to part 2, the Sunshine Protection Act, where time is locked. Let's see how this builds our understanding of congressional procedure. For the Sunshine Protection Act, the committee went ahead and applied a strict closed rule. This basically means it's a straight-up up or down scenario. It waives all points of order against the bill, meaning, representatives can't use technical loopholes to stall it, and it allows for exactly 1 hour of debate, equally divided. So, yeah, absolutely no room for surprise floor amendments on this one. Okay, part 3, national security appropriations, opening the floor. Now, the procedural environment completely shifts when we look at H.R. 8595, which is the bill funding the Department of State and National Security for 2027. Just like the clocks bill, the general debate for this Appropriations Act is strictly limited to 1 hour. But because this is a massive funding bill with countless moving parts, a closed rule just won't work. So it gets a structured rule instead, which opens up the floor to some very specific modifications. To get through the really dense list of changes efficiently, the rules allow for something called amendments en bloc. This is a procedural move that gives the chair the power to offer a bundle of grouped proposals all together as a single package. And they get exactly 20 minutes to debate this entire bundled package, equally divided. It's an incredibly fast-paced way to legislate, to say the least. Which brings us to part 4, proposed foreign funding cuts and the debate roster. Now we get to the real heart of the structured rule, the highly specific, politically charged amendments that the committee has authorized for exactly 10 minutes of debate each. And the gatekeeping here is absolute. The rule explicitly states that if your amendment isn't printed in Part A of this Rules Committee report, well, you're officially benched. You cannot offer it on the floor, period. You literally have to be on the list. So let's take a look at a few of those carefully authorized proposed cuts that actually made the list. Representative Boebert has an amendment to eliminate funding for the Fulbright program. Then, Representative Crane proposes prohibiting funds for the National Endowment for Democracy. And Representative Perry's amendment aims to strike over $410 million from the Millennium Challenge Corporation. To really understand the massive scale of these 10-minute debates, just consider this number for a second. $3.3 billion. Representative Massey has an authorized amendment to prohibit funds for Israel, which would reduce the Foreign Military Financing Program account by this exact staggering amount. That's a huge shift, debated in just 10 minutes. And right after that in the report, another amendment by Representative Massey proposes a $2.1 billion reduction. This one would prohibit funds from being used for Jordan across multiple global health, foreign military financing, and national security accounts. So we're talking about two massive shifts in foreign policy, and again, each one is allotted exactly 10 minutes of floor time. But, not all amendments are massive cuts. The rule also allows for debate on shifting or adding funds. For instance, Representative Kamak is permitted to argue for increasing human trafficking combat funds by $5 million. Representative Plaskett can debate shifting $1 million toward Caribbean counter-narcotics. Meanwhile, Representative Fine has an amendment to strike $139.5 million from the Global Environment Facility. It's a pretty varied roster of ideas, but they're all tightly governed by the Rules Committee's clock. All right, Part 5, Veterans and Purchase Privacy, Closing the Loop. Let's dive into the final two bills authorized by this resolution, which brings us back from global affairs to immediate domestic impacts. Both H.R. 9237, which is a Veterans Benefits Administration bill, and H.R. 1181, a privacy bill that restricts how credit card companies code purchases at firearms retailers, well, they both return to that strict closed rule format we saw earlier. So they each get exactly 1 hour of general debate, with all points of order waived. And honestly, the preemptive power of the Rules Committee is just immense here. For that firearms privacy bill, the rule actually dictates that an amendment in the nature of a substitute, which is basically a complete rewrite of the bill recommended by the Financial Services Committee, shall be considered as adopted. Let that sink in. The completely rewritten bill is literally auto-adopted before the floor debate even begins. So as we wrap up this explainer, you really have to ask yourself a pretty big question. When a single committee can automatically adopt amendments before a bill ever hits the floor, and when exactly 10 minutes of structured debate can shift literally billions of dollars in foreign funding, where does the real legislative power actually lie? Is it with the representatives arguing out there on the floor, or is it with the gatekeepers writing the rules of the game? It's definitely something to think about the next time you hear about a major vote in the House. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning how the system really works.